United States of America.
Citizens United case 1 year ago, we said the corporations have the same rights as people to spend their money however they want on elections, with almost no restrictions, and that's the way it should be because corporations are people.
Don't you see what's happening in the United States?
We voted to give the corporations even more control over our elections than they already had.
And we sold out the American people one more time.
I'm Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I voted against this awful idea.
I'm Justice Clarence Thomas, and I'm an Oreo.
I believe my colleagues just bought the best democracy money can buy.
Recalibration test.
Our homes are being stolen. Corporations are all of a sudden people. We the people.
Down with corporations.
They've been bought by the
Power to the corporation.
Hello and welcome to the Alliance for Democracy's The Populist Dialogues. My name is David Delk and I'm the host of this series of half-hour weekly cable TV programs brought to you from the studios of Portland Community Media here in Portland, Oregon. The Alliance for Democracy is a citizens movement of progressive populists seeking to end corporate domination. If you agree with the statement that the ever-increasing levels of corporate money and corporate lobbyists in the political process undermine our ability to describe ourselves as a self-governing sovereign people, you should check out and join the Alliance for Democracy. More information is available on our national website at www.thealliancefordemocracy or from our Portland website at www.afd-pdx.org. Today, our guest is David Cobb. David Cobb is a lawyer, graduated from the University of Houston Law School in 1993. He worked as an advocate for democracy, working on issues of corporations. He also worked on the presidential candidates for president of Jesse Jackson and Jerry Brown. He was in 2002 he ran for Attorney General of Texas on the Green Party ticket. His campaign centered on his pledge that if elected he would use the power of the office to revoke the charters of corporations which broke the law. In 2004 he was the presidential candidate of the Green Party USA. On January 21 of 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court issued their decisions in Citizens United versus the FEC, ruling that corporations are people and are entitled to First Amendment free speech rights. David immediately hit the trail with Ricky Ott, an environmental activist from Alaska, as the chief spokespeople for Move to Amend, calling for amending the U.S. Constitution to eliminate corporate personhood. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's very exciting to see that the Portland Alliance for Democracy is taking the adage to heart. Don't hate the corporate media, become the media.
Yes, become the media. That's actually one of our motivations for doing this.
Absolutely.
And particularly on cable programming, there is so much I don't want to disparage any of the other programming, but there is not a program which is focused on issues. And so we wanted to bring at least one program that would focus specifically on these kinds of issues, in particular with regard to the role of corporations in our democracy. So you're a perfect fit for our show.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
I will say that I've had the privilege of participating in public access throughout the country, and it's really important for viewers to really fully appreciate the fact that the only reason you're hearing this level of conversation is because you are hearing it without the corporate filter, because that's what happens in so-called mainstream media, which is really simply corporate media, which is honest conversations about what's happening in this country are simply not told. Viewers probably know, if you're watching Portland community media, that the corporate media is actually mostly lies and propaganda. Some great entertainment, but when it comes to news, it's mostly propaganda.
Right, yes. Well, we agree with that, so thank you. Yeah, so what we wanted to do today was focus on the Citizens United case. The Supreme Court said that corporations are people, and they have a right to free speech, and to be able to put as much money, essentially without limits, into the political process.
That's right. Let's be clear. This is not the first time that the United States Supreme Court has based a decision on the completely illogical, completely preposterous, obviously non-true idea that corporations are persons. The first time that the Supreme Court ever even discussed this issue was over 100 years ago. There have been at least 30 to 40 different decisions where the different nature of the decision related on whether or not corporations should have any of the constitutional rights that are afforded to us as people. But the Citizens United case is probably the single worst and most outrageous example. And you're right. The Supreme Court overturned the most basic campaign finance laws that we had in this country under the McCain-Feingold law. In essence, they said that, and get this, David, the Supreme Court said that the McCain-Feingold law treated corporations as a second-class citizen, as an oppressed minority. And as such, they overturned most of the provisions of McCain-Feingold and now allow both corporations and trade unions and anybody else the ability to spend unlimited amounts of money in independent expenditures. Basically, in the last election cycle, we saw more money spent than has ever been spent in a federal election. Corporate cash is overwhelming the system.
Okay, great. Yeah, and what do you propose to do about it?
Well, at movetoamend.org, we're very clear that we need a movement, a democracy movement in the United States. David, we like to say that the most dangerous threat to democracy in the United States of America is the mistaken belief that we actually have one. This is not actually a functioning democracy. Democracy means the people rule. We're not ruling in this country. Unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are not just exercising power, they are ruling us. They're making the fundamental public policy decisions that affect our lives. So, broadly speaking, we need a democracy movement in this country that will match and even go further than what we're seeing sweeping across Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and all of the Arab world, and in Latin America. We need to take ourselves seriously as a self-governing people. We believe that we need to organize locally, organize at the state level, and ultimately we're going to have to come to terms with the supreme law of the land, which is the United States Constitution, and take away from the Supreme Court the alleged power to interpret our Constitution such that corporations have constitutional rights. So one of the many proposals that we have is to amend the United States Constitution, make it clear that only human beings have inherent human rights under that document.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Is it possible to do that with a amendment, or are we talking about a multitude of amendments? Or?
Well, David, that's a good question. We actually support a series of amendments, what we would call democracy amendments, just as the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendments of the US Constitution are currently called the Civil War Amendments or the Civil Rights Amendments. We think that we need a series of amendments. The first one would make it clear that only human beings have constitutional rights afforded under that document, basically eliminating the idea of corporate personhood. In addition, we need an amendment that makes it clear that money is not speech. Money is property, and therefore expenditures of money can be properly regulated at either the local, state, or the federal level. We also think that we need an amendment to make it clear that local communities have the right to protect their own environment, to protect their own elections, to protect their own workers, to protect their public health and safety, and strip away the power of the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and others of these international organizations that are currently able to overturn local democratic control.
Actually, one of my questions was going to be how you viewed these international trade agreements, these free trade agreements in terms of corporate personhood, with the observation that it appears that they have taken the corporate personhood, which the Supreme Court has given corporations within the United States, and that those agreements take those and make those international.
They do, David, and that's a very astute question and observation, because what we see is that just as the United States Supreme Court is stripping the sovereignty away from local and state governments, and even our own federal Congress, so too are these international organizations stripping the sovereignty of the entire United States government. And it's no surprise that you have principled progressives and principled conservatives who are actually coming together to demand an end to these outrageous examples of international law basically undermining the sovereignty of the people of the United States of America. I'm very proud to say that there are libertarians and principled conservatives, Republicans who are working with us at Move to Amend, because they see that between these international trade agreements and the United States Supreme Court, that we the people are losing control of our own government.
So you see that there could possibly be an alliance between Tea Parties and progressive populists?
David, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it. I mean, you know, at movetoamend.org, and I really want to encourage your viewers to please go to the website, www.movetoamend.org, and sign our petition calling for a constitutional amendment to strip corporations of constitutional rights. And you will join over 103,000 people who have joined and growing. Again, we've never been covered by the corporate media, and we're the fastest growing movement in the country. And you will join the founder of teaparty.org, who has actually signed the petition, and we're in contact with. You'll join principled Republicans, principled conservatives, as well as progressives, liberals, and independents, people who typically don't engage themselves in elections, really have seen the impact of Citizens United, really have come to the point of realizing that unless we actually take control over the governing institutions of this country, we can't solve any of the problems that face us.
And as I recall, when the Supreme Court issued their decision in January of last year, I believe it was the Washington Post did a poll of people who, you know, as to how people felt about the decision. And the decision, the polling showed that a vast majority of the country, and I forget the specific number, was opposed to that decision.
And David Delk, 80% of the American people do not agree with the erroneous ruling, the flawed logic of the United States Supreme Court. And get this, that includes 74% of people who self-identify as Republicans do not agree with this decision. I personally have never worked on an issue where there was such broad and deep support across ideologies, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green, Libertarian. Really virtually no segment of the American population except the wealthy believe that this was a good decision. And so I'm very excited that we are in the early stages of this democracy movement in the United States. And frankly, again, folks, if you're watching this and if this conversation makes sense, get involved. Get involved locally with the Alliance for Democracy, which is a chapter of the Move to Amend National Coalition, or call us up at 707-269-0984, and we'll work with you as we begin the process of building the movement that we're going to need in order to take our country back from these corporate hijackers and the Supreme Court that has been complicit in the theft of our democracy.
Great, good. And Move to Amend has a steering committee and allied organizations. Is that how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very proud to say, David, that the Move to Amend coalition is a truly functioning coalition. We have about 25 national and local organizations who are knee-deep in it, who are involved. We've got another 7 anchor organizations that are serving on an executive committee. Very proud to give a shout-out to Nancy Price of the Alliance for Democracy that just joined the executive committee of Move to Amend. But we have also local and state chapters forming, and they're forming almost faster than we can really support them, because I think people are ready to act. People are outraged and they are ready to act. And so if anybody is actually looking at this and is not from Portland, again, give us a call at that national number and we'll plug you in with folks who are working all across the country. We've got a Florida Move to Amend statewide chapter with local affiliates all across that state. We've got an Ohio Move to Amend chapter. We've got a Wisconsin Move to Amend chapter. And go Wisconsin, right? The cheese does not stand alone. We are seeing the entire country cheering the 100,000 people who are in the streets of Madison, Wisconsin today, fighting back against this right-wing assault on workers' rights. And so it's quite exciting as we see the incredible reaction. I like to say it this way, David. We are building a bicycle while we ride it. So if you do contact us, be patient with us, because we're all unpaid volunteers just doing our best. But I have never been part of a movement where there was so much energy, so much excitement, so much optimism, and so much belief that we can do it.
Yes, I really can't think of any movement or anything that I've been involved with since the Vietnam War that had the energy as the anti-war movement did and the civil rights movement going on at about the same time. So this is really very exciting.
It really is, David. And this is the other thing that the corporate media will not tell you. We're winning. We, the people, are actually going to win this, and we're going to actually take our country back. And we're going to do it because people like you join with people like David Delk and the Alliance for Democracy, and people like the Detroit Women of Color and Democracy Unlimited of Humboldt County, and the Liberty Tree Foundation, and the Independent Progressive Politics Network, and the scores of other organizations that are committing staff time and resources into making this movement go. And at the local level, at the state level, and ultimately at the federal level, we're taking our culture back and our government back.
Great, yeah. So a lot of people have expressed concern about amending the Constitution at all, feeling that if you start the process, where does it end?
Well, you know, David, first of all, I'll remind you that that was the same argument that the abolitionists heard. It's the same argument that the women's suffrage movement heard. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to understand this, that our legal system is being used against us. So we have to fight. We are actually being attacked, and we need to fight back, and we need to assert our right to interpret our own Constitution. The Supreme Court has said corporations are persons, and that therefore local, state, and even federal action that attempt to control corporate harm and abuse, those laws are being overturned. And it's not just laws relating to corporate campaign contributions, but environmental protection laws are overturned. Worker protection laws are overturned. Public health laws are being overturned. Safety and health laws are being overturned. I mean, a whole series of laws are overturned when we, the people, try to make meaningful change to protect our way of life. So we have to begin the process. And make no mistake about it, the corporatists are already involved in efforts to amend the Constitution. So this is we are in a struggle for what it means to be an American. We are in a struggle for what the U.S. Constitution even means. So I believe that those of us who believe in a truly self-governing document, who really believe that it means that individual human beings have rights that government can encroach upon, but that we, the people, have the right and the duty to actually define how the other social institutions work, we better get in the game.
Yes. Yeah, and this is one of the things I've said for a long time on this show and otherwise, is that the working class and the middle class of America have been under attack at least since the days of Reagan, when he first attacked the unions, and it's been all downhill since then. And it actually went on long before that as well.
It did, but you're right to really identify the Reagan years as the years that really the attack on workers began. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember the busting of the Air Traffic Controllers Union, and the assaults have really began in earnest then. And I got to tell you, folks, it wasn't just Reagan and the Republicans, but Bill Clinton and the Democrats who shoved NAFTA down our throats was also an assault and an attack on workers. And I'm sad to say that President Barack Obama, with his Korean free trade agreement that he's trying to push through Congress, is another example. I mean, it's not about Democrats and Republicans, folks. It's about up and down. The ruling elite have hijacked both of the main political parties, and they are using the political parties to put a boot on the neck of workers, to put a boot on the neck of environmentalists, to put a boot on the neck of those of us who believe in a different way of living on this planet. And so I say we have to really be serious about building a broad and deep social movement, and that movement, I believe, should be clear and unambiguous in our demand for a peaceful, just, democratic, and ecologically sustainable world, and that we make those demands at the political level. And if we don't find candidates who are willing to champion those ideas, then we need our own candidates. It's as simple as that.
Right, yeah. Be explicit about some of the ideas.
Okay, so I think that the very first idea is that money is not speech, and therefore we need, and the Supreme Court has been saying this for 25 years now. So if we're going to actually have not just voluntarily publicly funded elections, but actually mandate them, which is what I believe we need to do. We need to amend the US Constitution to make it clear that money is not speech, and any governmental level has the authority to require publicly funded elections. We need a constitutional amendment to make it clear that only living, breathing human beings have inherent constitutional rights. Because, David, to have a constitutional right means that you have the authority and the right to go into court to try to overturn laws. And I want to tell you very explicitly and clearly that anytime there is a law that actually infringes upon a human right, the law is illegitimate, and we ought to be able to go into court to overturn it. And I will join anyone, whether they're a Republican, a Libertarian, a Green, a Democrat. If there are laws that restrict our individual civil liberties, that law should be overturned. The Patriot Act, shoved down our throats by both Democrats and Republicans, should be overturned because it violates the civil liberties of human beings. But the idea that concentrated capital, businesses can actually overturn democratically enacted laws, that's just outrageous. So we need to make it clear that that can't be done. But I'll go even further, David. We need to end war as foreign policy in the United States of America. And, we need to stop voting for candidates of any political party who are willing to fund those wars. And we need to ensure that we begin to wean ourselves off of the addiction to coal and oil and other fossil fuels, which is fueling runaway global climate crisis, and transition ourselves into safe alternative energy sources. Frankly, we need to dismantle the United States participation in the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. And even further, we need to actually decharter the Federal Reserve and create a national bank so we can have a democratic control of our money supply. We need to ensure that health care is a fundamental human right and is not a commodity that is bought and paid for at a profit. We need to change the way this country operates.
That sounds like the perfect platform for the Alliance for Democracy. That's almost exactly what I believe. I can't think of a disagreement there.
Well, that's the reason that I'm proud to say I was at the founding convention of the Alliance for Democracy, have attended many of the national conventions of the Alliance for Democracy, and proud to work shoulder to shoulder.
All right, excellent, good, yeah. We don't have too many minutes. Can you quickly tell us what the process is for amending the Constitution?
Well, there are two ways. One, Congress can pass a proposed constitutional amendment, and then it gets sent to the states for ratification by 3/4 of the states. The other way that it can be done is for the states to actually call a constitutional convention when 3/4 of the states do so. But most importantly, David Delk, what we at MoveToAmend.org are calling for is a mass movement that is demanding that the Constitution be amended and that we actually create democratic structures and mechanisms for us to democratically control our economics, our politics, our media, etc. We need a movement.
We need a movement, yes. And I think we've seen a move, or at least the beginnings of a movement with all of the labor, particularly in Wisconsin. I mean, that's very exciting.
And beyond. I mean, we had between 10 and 20,000 people rallying in Ohio. I mean, rallies are going on all across the country. Corporate media is not covering this, but remember, corporate media is lying to you. Corporate media provides great entertainment, good coverage of sports, but if you want news, information, and analysis, you need to plug in to People's Media, because that's the only place you're actually getting real, honest-to-goodness information.
Great. Good, good. Our show and our time is up, so thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, David.
Good, great, yeah. So we will actually continue this conversation because we're going to record a second show right after this, and it will show next week on these same channels. In the meantime, I did want to, oh, let's see, we've got an action step. Whoop, the action step just went away. Okay, I hope everyone saw that. In the meantime, on April 16th, we have the opportunity to join the people from Wisconsin in our streets here in Portland, Oregon, for a rally and a march for jobs and benefits, not cuts. That will be April 16th at noon at Pioneer Courthouse Square. 8 million jobs have been lost since the beginning of the 2008 meltdown. Today there's 5 job seekers for every job available. So we are calling on everyone who works for a union or with a union, everyone who is not represented by a union, everyone who works for a living, everyone who is unemployed or underemployed, or wishes to be employed, or are the children of those who are in some of those conditions, to show up and support the social safety net, no cuts to benefits, and full wages for all. We need to focus on creating jobs instead of being concerned, as the federal government is, in reducing deficits. Reducing deficits is a way of cutting jobs, not increasing jobs. So again, I invite you to be there. Join your brothers and sisters in the streets of Portland, April 16th, Saturday, 12 noon, Pioneer Courthouse Square. So I also want to thank our crew today. We wouldn't be on the air without them. Janice Morris, Roger Bates, David King, and Joan Horton. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again next week.